What's happening, everybody? We are getting started with, let me take my hat off so now I look professional. I just want to give a shout out to staff for giving us these shirts. As I said, I'm always and only going to wear these shirts from now on. So thank you, Dr. Robinson.
I don't have a color, so
Absolutely.
Give me the colors
have
of the
mine.
rainbow. I'm wearing them every time.
It's coming, I got you.
Okay, that's what we're saying.
All right, I should probably pull up the meeting and the meeting agenda. Be a good idea. I know we're gonna, thanks for doing that for me. Let's go ahead and jump into operations update since it's the first day of traditional school.
So, obviously, we have some other updates coming after
You can do
this.
the HVAC updates when,
But I will provide some hot off the press information on transportation this morning. I think you'll all be interested in that. We had a total of 24 bus driver call-outs today. That compared to the end of the school year last year, they were running somewhere in the low 70s, just for context. 96% of our runs were on time, and we had 72 late runs. Obviously, we got some new routes, we got new drivers. We also, first day or so of school, experienced some delays from some of the senior parades that might be going on throughout the county, so that could have contributed some to those delays. But that's just information from this morning. All in all, I think it was a decent day to start with the first day of school.
let me also just take a moment to give a shout out to the city of Raleigh. They've been paving streets, and St. Mary's going by Broughton was on that list, and I had a mini panic attack when I drove by there 2 weekends ago because they said it was going to get paved potentially this week, which would be a nightmare to start school. I know I reached out to Stormy Ford, Councilor Ford, and I know staff reached out, and so City of Raleigh got it done for us, and I drove it yesterday. I was so happy, and just really appreciate the City of Raleigh doing that and getting it done and being timely, so it didn't cause any headaches for Broughton families this morning. All right, we're going to jump right into HVAC after we can approve the minutes of the June meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Ms. DeShiba, Riley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, as always, we take questions kind of during the presentation, but you guys can get it moving. If I see hands, I'll call on them to stop where we're at.
Sure. Great, thank you. Good afternoon. It's good to see you all here on this 90-plus degree first day of traditional calendar school to discuss HVAC. Need a slide. Thank you. There we go. Presenting with me today will be our new Director of Energy and Fiscal Plant, Lou Nellen. Lou comes to us from UNC Pembroke, where he was Superintendent of Facilities Management. His previous experience with K-12 maintenance services in Layton County and Sampson County, where he also worked with Dr. Taylor. And prior to his current career in maintenance, Lou served with the Army for 23 years. And I don't think anybody is happier to have him than I am. So, Lou, I want to wave, tip the cap. Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very glad to be here.
Thank you, and we are also as equally excited that you're here as natives.
You know, that position has been vacant since I've been here.
Which is how long?
Before, so.
How long has that been?
At least 3 years.
Okay.
We're glad to have it.
It's been vacant for 3 years because I was the last person to sit in the chair.
Got it.
And a slide? Which way to go? There we go. So some of you were here last year for the presentation. These are some of our maintenance statistics. As you can see, there's a considerable number of equipment assets that we manage. This time of year, we're going to focus on the 300 chillers in the portfolio. And today, we're going to discuss how we keep them operational. A considerable amount of work orders related to chillers and boilers are considered emergency work orders, as they affect our ability to conduct school. Maintenance receives between 450 and 500 emergency work orders per month, and about half of those are related to HVAC. Our goal is to address these work orders within 24 hours, and a considerable number of them are. A lot of them are resets, simple things that have failed, and staff is able to get those things turned back on. Over the last 12 to 18 months, some of our emergency work orders related to chillers have taken longer to address, despite the emergency status, because we are almost entirely dependent on outside vendors to diagnose and repair our machines. Next slide. There we go. Our departmental challenges continue to be staffing related. The vacancies in the HVAC shop and with our building automation team have remained unchanged since this time last year, despite considerable support from multiple departments, particularly our communications department, who's been highlighting available openings. Some of our candidates that have interviewed have declined to accept positions.
Do they say why?
It's typically the compensation. Our regional maintenance department, those are our site-based maintenance personnel. These staff members have multiple responsibilities for general maintenance at the schools and our first responders when HVAC issues are encountered. They can perform resets of critical equipment, and they begin our troubleshooting process. Vacancies in this department affect our response time to emergency work orders. Regional maintenance has a similar vacancy rate to last year of about 25%. The staff that we do have are moving up to fill lead roles and leadership positions, but we struggle to backfill entry-level positions, which are most responsible for performing the work. We're heavily reliant on contracted services, especially when it comes to chiller and HVAC repair. Most of our troubleshooting and repair work are sent to outside vendors to address. While we have multiple vendors that hold contracts for our chiller repairs, our vendors have a limited number of technicians that can perform this work. We have very good relationships with a lot of our vendors, but we are also not their only customers. There are times when our vendors are unable to meet our timelines.
Hang on. 1 second.
Right. So are we paying commercial rates and like private industry rates for the contractors' work?
Yes, I mean, those are open bid contracts, so we do have a bid process, but yes, those are closer to the general market.
Is it, well, I mean,
Yeah.
ju-
I mean, say it.
it's just a
'cause-
statement, like, rather than doing it that way, if, it would be nice if we could just raise our compensation to meet that level. And I'm crystal clear, that's not a small dollar amount, but if we're doing it anyway, it's just something for us to think about when we go into our new budget season.
Mr. Swanson.
I think my question was along those same lines of, saying, can we identify a vendor or a company that can meet those needs? Because I know you said that typically it takes 24 hours, and sometimes those folks cannot meet those demands, but we all know that teaching and learning can't take place when kids are trying to learn in extreme weather. So I think we have to look a little bit outside the box with this. I don't know how many vendors we have, but I wonder if there's just a company that we can work with or partner with. Because yes, I would love to see those wages increase, but I also know if you increase wages, there's other needs in this budget that we're going to have to deal with, but we need to find a solution quickly.
Yeah, so we will get to that later in the presentation, but we are pursuing those avenues with some of our vendors.
I'll pin that question in case I need to bring it back up.
Good. All right, we'll proceed. Okay, the next slide. There we go. So the list of facilities under repair on this slide is a selection of our most problematic areas currently. the units of these facilities are not only waiting parts or under repair, but have temporary chillers deployed like Martin Middle, or they've been placed onto a life cycle list for equipment replacement like Carroll, or they have both. Moore Square, Lake Myra, and Southeast Raleigh are all due for projects, and we are, as the maintenance department, getting them to that finishing line. Maintenance department will continue to perform any necessary repairs on the equipment that's in place to restore regular operation until it can be replaced. So, for instance, at Lake Myra, both machines have significant repairs that need to be made, and we're going to get there with the project, but until that time, we're going to invest the necessary money to at least get that school the capacity it needs so that they can hold class.
So how are we notifying schools and communicating then, making sure the communication goes not just from the principal level, but down to the teacher level and then out to parents at schools that have repeated problems so they understand what is coming and when is coming?
So from the maintenance department, Lou in particular has been in direct contact with area soups and other leadership to kind of keep them abreast of what's happening with critical repairs. And we're assuming that's filtering down through school leadership to what's happening there.
Well, my follow-up, and it's not just for you all, but for other staff, area soups included, is ensuring that it is actually getting to school staff. So I'm not getting teachers emailing saying, what about this school? And instead, they've been provided that proactively, either from their principal, and maybe they've missed an email, but it's the same for parents, is how are we sending it out to parents? And I know that's not necessarily a facilities question, it's more of working with a school and communications, but so we can create some kind of expectations. You know, one of the reason for this presentation is so aside from the necessary, it being necessary to work on our HVAC problem, is for transparency to families, to our staff, which I can feel as the facilities chair isn't there, and it's a place where we really need to improve for these issues for HVAC.
So one of the things I'll say is that I will revisit with staff to make sure that we can provide the principals clear, comprehensive understanding of where their systems are, age, things of that nature. What will continue to kind of be on the hamster wheel is if something breaks down that wasn't anticipated. We can talk about a schedule of replacement and all the things that we're going to do to repair it, but if there's an actual breakdown that leads to issues in the school, I can tell you that I've heard nothing but good things about the communication that Mr. Nealon has provided, but we'll make sure that we work with schools about how they get that information out more transparently to parents and students and staff to make sure it's not just sitting on the principal's desk. Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Taylor, I also wanted to add that when principals receive information, we connect them, either they contact communications or we help them contact communications, and immediately communications begin to draft. If there's something happening that day, such as AC or,
Sure,
or whatever that's out of whack, they create a communication to go home to parents, and they continue to update the parents as well as the staff if it's going to be fixed or not.
And I know that's generally been good. It's more the repeated schools where we have repeated problems. So and I know we're going to get to what's coming on the replacement list, but it's more beginning to communicate that information versus the day-to-day problems of, more squares on the list. Here's when it's coming. We're trying to keep it operating until this time, sort of thing. You may.
Maybe the next slide. So from a maintenance perspective, there are some other areas of concern that we have that affect our ability to operate facilities. There are several schools in portfolio that don't have the ability to actively dehumidify due to the design of their HVAC systems. When HVAC systems don't have, and I might get a little bit technical here to explain it, but when HVAC systems don't have a heating and cooling coil in a particular arrangement, you can't overcool the air and warm it back up to a temperature to let all the humidity drop out. And there's a number of schools in the district that weren't designed with that ability. They were designed with the ability to heat or to cool. And those are our dual temperature systems. Both heating and cooling functions use the same pair of pipes in the building, and they can't run simultaneously. Other facilities can run both systems at the same time, but lack the coil configuration to cool and then heat. So high humidity levels obviously create uncomfortable atmospheres for schools, even though the space's temperature is at set point. It feels, we've all been outside here in North Carolina. It's hot, it's clammy. We endeavor to give them a drier atmosphere so it's more comfortable. Obviously, facilities like that, there's no immediate way to address that situation. That's a long-term thing that will have to come into planning and renovation. But in the meantime, we tell the schools to try and keep the doors closed as much as possible, let the systems kind of naturally dehumidify as best they can. But it is a struggle all through some of these, especially if they're summer schools that live all year. We do struggle with that at certain facilities. Next part is obviously the chiller fleet. The chiller fleet is aging, as we've talked about. About 25% of our units are 20 years old or older. This is when we would typically place that asset on the life cycle list for replacement. On the horizon, almost 50% of our units are 15 years old or older. So that's nearly 150 machines. Those machines are going to require more maintenance as they age, and our replacement cycle will probably need to pick up over time in order to minimize outages in the future. A third item on that list is just as important as the other two, but it's the age and obsolescence of our building automation systems. These are the hardware and software components that operate our HVAC systems. Without building automation, we cannot centrally control or monitor schools. Systems may have to be operated in a manual position, which means that they're always on, and some units may not operate at all. The life cycle group is replacing systems as quickly as they can, and maintenance staff warehouses any viable components from renovation projects. But for some of these systems, new components are no longer available. Questions? Okay. Okay.
Mr. Swanson.
So I'm going to go back to my question I raised earlier, because I looked through the presentation, still didn't hear my question being answered or raised. Oh, the other thing I just want to say, Mr. Nealon, thank you. I've heard nothing but great things from folks in the community and principals about your communication, showing up, being there, which is half the job, and giving folks that sense of hope that we're working on this. So thank you and welcome. I think all of us get quite a few emails about HVAC being an issue, and even if we put something in play where their board members are going to reach out to us, and our job is to facilitate the process. But I was hoping that we can, what is the cost that it would take to repair most of these, so that, or as we're going into talking about the budget pieces, let's go on and start raising these concerns now, so we can at least, have these conversations with, other electeds or commissioners, whoever needs to be at the table, so we're not causing interruption to the student learning. And that's my concern, is that learning and teaching cannot take place with these interruptions. And I get that some of this stuff is due to age, but I think we have to be proactive about this. And I have not quite, and I'll wait to the next piece, but I have not quite seen too many good solutions that we can move this forward. So I guess that's rather a comment than a question.
Well, let me see if I touch on it next here, and if not, I'm happy to try and further address your question. So, maintenance is making every effort to ensure facilities are operational for teaching and learning. We're actively routing our staff and vendors to facilities with the greatest level of need first. We've also designated select vendors to perform regular repairs on unitary equipment like those on mobile units so that we don't get further behind while we're addressing emergencies. We're operating facilities with central plant deficiencies around the clock in an effort to provide cool buildings in the morning and for as long as possible throughout the day. Temporary equipment has been utilized at several facilities and is being relocated as those systems are repaired. Our facilities, all facilities are programmed to run at occupied temperatures this year, 3 weeks prior to the open of school in an effort to identify and repair deficiencies before staff and students return. We've made an arrangement with one of our chiller repair contractors for some standing labor to help every day with troubleshooting and repair. And our staff is monitoring schools with known deficiencies after hours and over the weekends to prioritize response as needed. The maintenance staff, obviously, we spoke about lose constant contact. The maintenance staff has been in constant contact with area superintendents and other district leadership about the ongoing status of critical repairs. And our customer service department has been receiving regular briefings from staff as to the repair status as well. We feel that the improved communication has kept stakeholders more informed and reduced some of the anxiety associated with critical equipment repair. Obviously, our goal in the maintenance department is to deliver safe and comfortable environments for learning and teaching. We strive to make improvements on that process every day in pursuit of that goal. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah,
Ms.
so,
Rice.
I've been listening and weighing and trying to make sure I understand everything. I do have to say that I don't know about our other members, with Mr. Swanson here, like, we really sincerely have to do something immediately and directly around the repairs and figuring out something. Because at the end of the day, none of us can learn in an environment or even work in an environment that's not conducive, right? Too hot, too cold, broken. The constant shifts that schools have to incur about whether or not school's going to be closed. And let's not mention the people that pay for us to sit at this table, because their bottom line at their work is affected. And if we don't have tax dollars, none of us get paid at the end of the day. And I think, I hate to put it like that, but I think that we have to look at it in facilities, a hard look, an innovative look, an aggressive approach around looking at this and solving these challenges. My child was one affected by the bus rides this morning. I'm extremely concerned. If I get a message that says that my pickup time is at 7:16, or they'll arrive at school at 7:16, well, school starts, the last bell rings at 7:25. So if that's what the base is, so then you're telling me this child's going to be late for school every day.
Just give them HVAC.
Right.
I got you.
I know, but we mentioned that, and I'm just tying it all in.
Okay, I got you.
So of just saying why we have to move aggressively about HVAC, the issues that happens, the bus, everything. We have to look at a different approach than what we're already doing in facilities. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to keep on saying it every opportunity I get, because it's serious and it's affecting families. And it's my schools. I know other schools are affected, but the ones that I'm responsible for advocating for complaint-wise. We advocate for all schools, but for complaint-wise, these schools and families are deeply affected in deeper ways with missing school or having to come pick your child up because the HVAC systems don't work. So I just wanted to reiterate that around with Mr. Swanson about we've got to do something different, and I don't want to keep asking. I really need to see response.
Caulfield?
I have a couple of things, so bear with me. It's all kind of the same thing, but how many mechanics and staff do we have, and how many would we need to be beneficial or efficient in the way that we need for 200 schools?
We currently have, I believe I said it was, we have 8 HVAC technicians right now. We have 7 vacancies in the department. We have 2 chiller technician positions available. Both of them are vacant. So it's difficult for me to say what would it take, you know, in a perfect world, what would that department look like? It'd be as many people as possible.
Just a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
How long has it been? 15 is the number. I mean, were we trying to have 15, 10 years ago when we had significantly less schools, or?
We haven't added any positions in my almost 14 years here.
Okay, that's what I was.
Actually, we've added the 1 chiller technician. We were trying to add a second technician while we had someone in the position. It got added, and we weren't able to fill it, and then our technician retired almost 2 years ago.
So you have how many chillers?
We had 2 vacant positions for chiller technicians.
So does that mean we have none?
Yes.
So we're at 50% vacancy with almost,
Yes.
with our, or actually over, with our,
We're at about 50%.
at about
Yes.
50%, and then 100% with our chillers. Okay. I know we've been revisiting this over and over again, and this is by no means a reflection of you and your staff. So follow me on this. So I know we keep having these repeated conversations about how many schools are up to date, how many schools are behind. It seems like staff is doing what they can. 24 hours is a great turnaround time, but you got 5,800 work orders. That's a lot, right? So now we jump to, I don't think it's the current staff that's not doing a good job. It sounds like it's more inadequate number of staff for the sufficient size that we have, right? So we've talked about this before. We had this emergency. This is before you came in last year, Dr. Taylor, but we were kind of having the same conversations last year. So it seems like we're always putting out a fire rather than being proactive. And again, I'm not saying that it's something that you guys are doing incorrectly, but for me, instead of talking about the budget for next year, obviously it needs to be a priority. Do we have funds now, any kind of emergency funds that we can do? Because I agree with what, and that's exactly where I was thinking, where Ms. Edmonds was coming from. Why it almost seems wasteful money to be spending on vendors than it does to actually be investing that extra money in our own staff that we have full-time and doing maintenance ahead of time that could hopefully put out some of the fires and we don't have 5,800 work orders. So budget question for now and later, because I don't think we could wait a whole year to work on, or not a whole year, but I don't think we could wait that long to see what we can do next year.
So I'll address some of that because I think that is at the core of what we need to address with our public, and it was sort of what Mr. Swanson was hitting on. So one of the things that I want us to do in a relatively short amount of time, and they've gotten the information, but I want to make sure we talk about accurate information when we release it, but being honest and transparent with our public about what the actual cost is to replace this equipment. And so we know that a lot of this goes back to the recession in 2008, and there's been a lot of deferred maintenance to where that number, I think, is approaching $800 million. And
Somewhere 600 to 800.
And so, and that's just a whole bunch of things. When we talk about HVAC, one of the things that Mark shared with me early on is that before we were spending about $20 million on, I guess, life cycle repairs, and now it's $40 million annually that we spend. 22.5 million to spend on HVAC. I asked Mark about those numbers, and we have about $140 million in HVAC needs. So if we made the decision that, you know what, we're just going to put it all towards that, it would take 4 years just to cover all the needs at $40 million a year. And if we at the current level, 22 million, is going to take 14 years. Putting it all there means we don't do anything else, so we understand that. So part of this conversation is getting everybody to understand what the cost is going to be to really deal with these issues and these problems. That's what we have to be transparent. And then that is our responsibility to talk about how we change revenue, how we ask for additional revenue that we don't already have. I can tell you that a lot of this does go to the availability of staff, old equipment that while we may have schedules for replacement, when something breaks down unexpectedly, that's when you begin to play whack-a-mole. And so we know we're going to play that until we don't have to play it. But the idea is making sure that we've got both a short-term and a long-term plan in order to fix it. And that's part of what they've done. For the example of running equipment ahead of time before schools come back. Looking at adding temporary chillers that we have in place. These are the things that are going to help us through the short term. But ultimately, it is about saying this is what it's going to cost in order to replace these failing systems and hear all the information about the number of units and how that is a huge challenge when we know they can break down at any moment. And so I just wanted to share that, and Nate, Mark.
So, you know, this problem didn't crop up yesterday or last month or years ago. It has been decades, if not longer, in the making. You all remember there was a Great Recession back in the 2000s, and so I think I remember reading through one of the budget books, the classrooms were maintained back then, and we just haven't kept up. And we're working on some information now, analyzing that, so that we can bring and share it with you all about where we were and where we are now. But we have increased our funding for life cycle projects, and you'll hear about that in a minute. And there's some exciting things going on and being planned for those life cycle projects. And they didn't come up last week or last month. They've been in the planning stages for some time. This increase in funding that we got for life cycle, the 20 million when I got here up to the 40 million now, and half of that's going towards HVAC, chillers, and controls. That's pretty substantial, but it's a deep hole as well. And so that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, and Nate mentioned this, and he said it, and I want to reiterate it. The capacity to do and fix and repair and maintain is about the same as it was 14 years ago in terms of staffing levels. I have reached out to other large districts in the state to try and see and understand how they do things, have not been, or how they are staffed, and have not been able to get much headway with that. But just the sheer fact that the staffing levels are about where they were some years ago tells a story. And I do think we are doing lots of proactive things with what we have to work with. Flew here. You're going to hear about some things with Tony in a few minutes. But it is a heavy lift, but we'll bring you some information as we can get it together to show you exactly where we are and where we need to go.
Yeah, and then Mr. Agri.
I appreciate all that. Thank you. And I think one of the things that I was really trying to lean towards is for us as a board to prioritize the money towards filling that. I mean, 14 years is a long time to be dealing with that. 5,800 units of work orders, that's a lot. So, I mean, are there areas that we can pull from to give them the staff they need? And to Mr. Slavic's point, what he said earlier is they're telling you that they will not accept the job. So you have people coming to you, they're applying, so they want the job, but then when they get to the salary level, it sounds like it tapers off.
There's that. I think obviously in the area, these positions are highly coveted by private vendors, by public entities. Yeah, everybody needs HVAC techs, elevator technicians, all these specialty techs that are out there in very high demand, especially in our county. So to remain competitive is difficult.
But we are huge school district and
I
you have to,
understand.
right? So, and again, it's not a reflection on what you're doing. I'm saying, I'm asking us to prioritize and put the money where.
Yeah, and I
these
even think,
positions and-
yeah, even with the positions, they have looked at how they would look at changing the compensation. But I think the one thing that we do all understand is that if we get into a bidding war with private industry, we're going to lose that every time. So it is about making adjustments to compensation and making sure we have an organization where people want to be a part of. And so we got a highly talented person like Lou Nealon here. He could have gone somewhere else, but that's part of what we have to do, is to build that bench out. I actually had some conversations about how we can do a similar type program that we do with our students that look to go into teaching, and have the same kind of program with our HVAC students that can go into a school like Vernon Malone and go to Wake Tech, and then be able to come and begin to work for us and build that experience. And so once we get a person in place, there's a tendency that you can hold on to them. But it's private industry. We'll land someone every now and then, but for the most part, we would lose that. But it is about looking at our budget, as we said, and making sure that in our short range, we continue to do the kinds of things that they've shared with me to address these problems, but knowing that that fix that we need is not going to come in a short while unless somebody comes in and drops $300 million on the table and say, use this to fix an HVAC. But it is about the short range and the long range.
Thank you. So I agree, it is about, and to some degree, it is about priorities. And you all remember just sitting around the budget table and identifying different priorities. And as we go on since the budget, new priorities come up. And we hear about the price tags associated with all of it. And, it's not an unlimited pie. And so this is an area that, unless state funds for this become available, this is something we pay for out of our local county funds. It goes through a 7-year process of looking at our building, our renovation needs for major system repairs, and then we have these immediate problems. And we can choose to prioritize it, but it will mean giving up something else. In order to better understand this and better have a strategy for it, I'm wondering if staff can help us understand the scope of the project better. And what I mean by that is when we get a call that the AC is out or the heat is out at a school, I know it can be a problem with a unit, or it sounds like here we're talking about problems with whole systems, right? The need to replace a malfunctioning unit in a system that seems to work versus like an outdated system. And I don't know if you can answer this now, but to come back and be able to share with us, like, how long does it take to do like a system repair? I know you can come in and get a malfunctioning unit back online fairly quickly, but if you had to go into one of the dual temperature schools and basically, replace the system, how long does that take? Is that something that can be done during a school year and still have the school open? Does that happen in the summers? What do you do in year-round schools for those kinds of system repairs? And I don't know if you can address any of that now, or if that's like a bigger conversation.
I can actually give you some insight on that, not to interrupt Nate's presentation, but a project like that typically takes about 1 year and 4 months. From the time we do an RFQ for designers, select a qualified designer, get the contract executed, and get them started on design. And then once the design's complete, which is typically about a 3 to 4 month process, and then we have to bid the project out and go through that whole process of selecting the the qualified low bidder, and that contract executed, and actually start construction on a chill water system. A chill water lead time right now is 36 weeks. From the time we actually place the order to the time the equipment leaves the warehouse is 36 weeks. You've got an extra 2 weeks in shipping and rigging to get it there, so you're looking at 38 to 40 weeks if you don't have any major delays on the assembly line just to get the chill water piece of equipment. I have a very competent project manager that is actually a licensed mechanical contractor that runs almost all of our HVAC projects. He's very good at scheduling, and he has figured out how to actually replace dual temperature systems with 4-pipe systems in a school while it's occupied. And so we've been able to do that. Most of that work happens on holidays, weekends, and nights. But he works closely with staff, is able to take ceilings down, make areas safe, add the additional piping, and change the units out actually while the school's being used.
And that's within that 36 to 40 week window?
That's within that year and 4 months. That whole process from starting design to actually reaching final completion, getting all the inspections signed off on, and getting our contractors out of there for good is about a year and 4 months.
And depending on the project or type, it also has to be approved by DPI.
Yes.
And I can tell you that they have to make approvals for everybody in the state, and it's a very small staff. They do a great job, but I don't know if you want to talk about the time that it takes to get through.
The good thing about the approval for DPI is all of our engineers that do our HVAC projects have worked with us continuously for a while, and they go ahead and submit the DPI early. And so by the time we actually get ready to start construction, we have our DPI reviews done.
Right. So, and if you'll just allow me a few more questions, just to follow up on this. So, it sounds like you said you could do some of these system repairs without having to relocate students to another building. It just takes a long time from start to completion. Would you be able to bring us a plan that would show how many schools you'd recommend system repairs at? How many schools might just they don't have an outdated system, but maybe the equipment is past life cycle? And then, just like projected timelines and costs. And if that's something that you can bring to us as we go forward, we can go into the budget cycle armed with how big or small a project this is, how we could pace it, how we could phase it, and really talk to county commissioners, talk to other partners about how to do this. If we have a school bond coming, again, we have a lot of growth, but it sounds like we have real capital and renovation needs that the bond, the bond might be the only way to address some of these if we're talking real renovation and not just repair.
There are some other things that I want to add to how we do those projects, but we can talk about that when we get to my presentation. I don't want to interrupt Nate being able to move forward with his. And I have planned to touch on some of that.
Okay.
So.
I appreciate it. Well, I won't go too far off then, and we'll just bring it back.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Good. Ms. Evans, my
Yeah,
apologies.
because I think, if I'm looking at this right, you're at questions right?
Yes,
We're not
absolutely.
interrupting your, so I have 3 things. So to your point, Ms. Caulfield, and yours, Chair Haggerty, we need to know the number. Whatever the number is for the labor, whatever the number is for the equipment, whatever the number is for the replacements, we need to know the number so we can communicate that to the public. Not just commissioners, but the public needs to understand, with what the scale and scope. So you said it perfectly. So whatever that number is, we don't need to be afraid to share that. We need to put it out there. There was supposed to be, this is a question, there was supposed to be a statewide school construction bond on the ballot like 10 years ago, and the legislature refused to put it on the ballot. And it has not come back since then. Like, nobody's talking about it. And I know that Wake County typically gets less dollars than our more rural, high-needs counties when things like that come up. But if there were a statewide school construction bond, do you have any sense of how much that would help us?
So I would yield to David about what that would look like, and I don't know if that's done by ADM, but I do know that the last real conversation was, I want to say 2020, 2021, but then other things came up that caused it not to be on the ballot. They were really at the point where it was about to, they were talking about a $2 billion state school bond, but you can talk more about how they did it. I don't know if there's anything in that.
I do not believe it is done on an ADM basis. It is done, I would have to get the details, but on a wealth-based basis, but I would want to get the details of that. And I guess I'm going to give a comparison to try to put context around this. And what you're specifically talking about did not pass. But just to give a sense of what...
Can I interrupt you? I don't want to give the impression that voters didn't pass it. That's not what I'm talking about. It
the
wasn't
legislature.
Yeah,
right,
wasn't
okay, all right.
Yes. And again, maybe put context around numbers. The North Carolina lottery benefits school systems for school construction, including life cycle. And to give a general sense, the money flows from the state, then ultimately goes straight to Wake County government. It doesn't come to us, but it's on behalf of the Board of Education. And over time, to give a sense, the amount that is received on an annual basis effectively by the Wake County Board of Education, kind of at a low end, $8-ish, $6 to $8 million a year, and a high end, maybe 16 or 18. So I just throw those numbers out as far as additional revenues outside of the CIP program or the operating budget. Statewide, it's a big number, but when you kind of pare it back, it comes way back.
So the reason I mentioned the statewide bond is because it may be something that we want to revisit for our legislative agenda, for our next legislative agenda. In addition to, every little bit helps, right? And then my last thing is back to a much earlier slide about the communications to schools when they, I think I thought this is where you were going with this, Mr. Hershey. It would just, however we can communicate to even a classroom teacher when that classroom teacher's AC is not working and they place the order, they do everything right and you all receive it and it goes in the right queue, yeah? But just to communicate for them some kind of an ETA. And I know that can change because if something blows up over here, you've got to, that shuffles, right? The priority shuffles, and I do understand that. But I just think that if there's any way we can improve on that, to tell the principal or even down to the classroom teacher, if it's going to be 4 months, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Anything we can do, because I think that's a cause of great frustration, is it just goes into this black hole and they don't know if y'all are coming in 48 hours or if you're coming in 3 weeks, and anything we can do to try to help that, and that's it for mine.
Hang on, I've got 1, 2, and then Ms. Bonfield.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, also.
Sure, thank you. I echo the sentiments that my colleagues have made. Is I think it just helps for people to know. One, the community to know how much it really costs, because all they're getting is the other side of the news. One of the comments I made to a parent this morning is, we know that we have 200 schools. We can't assume that no one else understands the scope of our work. And I think the way that we allow the narrative about our district to be out there is people can just assume we got the 10 schools they know. And I just think we take way too much for granted. It is helpful to be honest and transparent with the community. Even if we put it on our bond and they vote it down, right? If it's on our CIP, at least we've done our due diligence to create a narrative that isn't just when the HVAC doesn't work or when a high school loses all of its bank days the first month of school because they don't have an HVAC. That's all that the community can hear, is those things. So it does matter if we have a price tag to put on these things, because it makes it very real to the community of the dire straits we're in. And Mark, this will sound familiar. It's also what I said about buses, is the more transparent you are, the better off you are with community support. Right now, we just let what they see on the news tell the story about who we are. And I don't think we should fear that these are large numbers, because the context is there are 200 schools, 160,000 students, 20,000 employees, that we are literally trying to create conditions for teaching and learning every day. That's our story, and that narrative, if you Google it, doesn't exist. And so that's my first thing is, yes, I think we have to put a price tag on it. I also think that it changes the scope of work with contractors and commercial vendors. You know why? Because they also have kids in our schools. They're married to people who work for our district. Like, I just think we miss an opportunity to engage the public. Oh God, I saw Ron's cash. I think we miss the opportunity to adequately ask people to be supportive of us so that they understand the scope of the problem. Otherwise, you're still going to keep hearing board members keep ranting and raving about the same thing, which is, what's the data? It's also, which the last thing I'll bring up, which we've talked a little bit about, but Mark and Dr. Lee, you're not going to be surprised I'm bringing this up. I have a school who sent us an email and said she doesn't submit maximum orders anymore because they don't get taken care of. They feel ignored. She sent us the data that she lost, not just students aren't learning, her teacher working surveys, she lost teachers because they're in rooms that don't have adequate heating and air. And we talked about people leaving for schools that may be harder to teach in. We have people leaving schools because they got a school that doesn't have an HVAC issue, right? Like, that's a reality I can't say I've ever seen or heard. And so that, for me, hit really hard to say that a principal is saying to me, not using maximum doesn't work. They're a school who we need to use dehumidifiers. She feels like she's constantly saying, please set the temperature at what we ask. We're a year-round school. Turning it off doesn't work for us. Like, these are things that if you didn't know, you now know because we have it in an email. But I don't think that this is one school. I think she is just the one that I happen to be reading this week that is being honest and transparent enough to say, I don't trust our system. So back to Ms. Edmonds' point, even if we have to say it's going to be a year and a half before we get to you, at least people feel heard and they feel like you're telling them the truth. But if we just keep saying, we're moving, we're coming, and we don't show up for 2 years, we've lost all the trust of the people who work for us. So I guess what you can hear me saying is create our own narrative so that we're honest and transparent, but also you, meaning we, have to collectively rebuild the trust of those people in the building. Because guess what? We don't have a district without the people in the buildings. And so, again, I echo what my colleague said, but reading that email, I was like, oh my Lord, we got people not even using our system because they don't trust us. So, you saw, I prepared you.
That you did.
All right, so promises one isn't about life cycle. But it does get to HVAC, and where we do have these HVAC issues. I know we talk about the temperatures and the kids being able to learn, but where we have the delays, I know of at least 3 schools where we've had the humidity issues that have led to mold issues. And I understand.
School too.
Yeah, and one that Mr. Swanson's working with, and a third. And I know that because of the health issues, we prioritize those projects, but what are we able to do not only to get the HVAC working, but then to also be able to do remediation where you have like visible signs of the problem, like in the carpets or walls or things like that?
Yeah, the facilities that we know have historically had issues before, we have different run schedules for those over the summer. Again, if they can't dehumidify, we'll let the temperature rise and then we'll turn them on to a really low temperature to try and naturally get some of that humidification out of there. Our environmental department is running dehumidifiers to a lot of places, especially with known problems. When we do encounter failures at different facilities and it pops up, our custodial services and our environmental services are very quick to deploy. So long as the HVAC system is also going to work. That's usually when that's the only thing that would delay like a cleanup effort. But yeah, we're very aware of it. Like I said, we have a handful of facilities that run a little bit differently over the summertime to try and get ahead of those situations.
Caulfield, did you have one more?
I'm just going to basically say ditto to Monica. She kind of
Okay.
took the words out of everything I was saying. It's just that we get a lot of emails
That's fine.
when one system's out.
You want to wait for the
And
thing,
if-
switch the life cycle?
We got to keep answering the same thing over and over again, but we kind of don't know. And if we don't know, they don't know.
Yeah.
So it's just having that whole picture out there. It is what it is. You know, how we go about our, remedying the issue is the next step, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, just, we understand it's out, this is what we're waiting for, and this is the time that we expect. But a lot of the times, like Lake Mirror, for example, I got a lot of emails from staff over the parents. It was just the staff that was like, can you please let us know what's going on? So it's just really helpful for us to answer to
Yeah.
them as well.
The maintenance department has historically been operate behind the scenes and just make sure it all works. And I think we are coming into the light of transparency along with everybody else. And old habits are kind of hard to break. We want what you want. We want these facilities to operate. And telling everybody how it operates is I think new to us, and we're trying to figure out how do we address that better while still conducting the work. And I want to address one thing that's been said multiple times. There's nobody at this table who'd love to replace a lot of these systems more than I would. I'd love some of these problematic facilities to go away, but they don't go away even when we replace them. Maintenance is continual. Whether it's 30 new facilities or 30 old facilities, it's just a question of how much we do. So we just have to. My pie is finite. We cut it up to provide all sorts of services, not just the HVAC. And I don't want to limit any of those services so that we can do any one thing. So we're trying to do our best with the resource that we have to give everybody everything. It's
I just
a
think the
struggle.
whole picture helps us help you, is really the bottom line, right?
So we're going to switch presentations, and I'm going to immediately say something that I would like to see as I'm listening to my colleagues. For this next presentation, when we have these things come to us, put price tags on them. Like, we have all these projects, we see all the life, there's no, there's like the cumulative, but like, how much does it cost to replace the Moore Square HVAC system? Because if we say that and we show it, people will start to understand. I don't have, like, what's a general cost to replace an HVAC system?
To replace the whole system?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
So we'll talk about chillers. Let's just talk about chillers. That's a real sore point right now with having considerable failures in our, some of it's aging fleet and some of it's just manufacturer related.
Yeah.
To replace a single chiller ranges from approximately $225,000 each up to about $400,000 to $425,000 each, depending on the size. So one of our most recent bids came in. We are bidding, and you'll see this as we go through these slides. Last year, after we had a bunch of chiller failures, Nate and I sat down and we went through a report generated from Maximo and scored all these chillers based on maintenance dollars that had been spent on them and the age, and sorted them out from most need to least need. And so we had tackled the first 10, I think it was. We had a group of 4, a group of 3, and a group of 3. So we attacked these chillers. We started just bidding out just chiller replacements. The most recent package that we came in, the labor cost to replace chillers at 3 schools by the same contractor in one package was $400,000 even. The cost of the chillers, a smaller chiller was $148,000, and that was in the 140-ton range. A 350-ton chiller, which is one of the largest ones that we have in the district, we don't have any much larger than So a 350-ton chiller, which is one of the largest in the district, was over $200,000, $238,000, I think, just for the piece of equipment. So that gives you an idea of the math for each one of these that goes down. You're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, like I said, between $225 and $425 a piece to replace. If we've got 150 aging in the district, and you take the average of $300,000 times 150 chillers, that'll give you where we're at in just chiller need. And that's a snapshot of this period in time right now. Next year, that snapshot's going to change. There's going to be more equipment that jumps into that, and so on as we move through time. So, for a system replacement at a school, an elementary school typically runs somewhere around $1.5 million to do a full system replacement. And when you get to a high school, you can be as high as $5 million a school to do a system replacement.
That is really important to continually put out there when we were talking about it, so people understand the actual costs that we face.
So that kind of gives you a range of numbers.
Yeah.
I can, off the top of my head, I can give you some numbers for fire alarms if you want that.
Well, you can kind of start your presentation, and
Just let me know.
I think Mark wants to jump in.
So before Tony gets into his presentation, one of the things we can bring to you all, once we tighten up the numbers, is a deferred maintenance list. We have it, but we need to go through and have Norm tighten it up and make sure costs are in line, at least in the near term, because in the long term, the costs can vary and increase greatly. So we can bring that to you all sooner rather than later, I think. And I think that will provide good context, and it won't just be for HVAC. It will be for a whole list of things in the life cycle realm of work that takes place. Paving, which is a huge effort for our district. Tennis courts, tracks, fire alarms, intercoms, all kinds, roofs. And so we will tighten that list up and bring it to you all and share it.
And I want to share that, talking about the HVAC concerns, that I know this is a report that Nate is compiling for each board member's district and the district as a whole, because he has some really good information on chiller age, how much it was purchased for, the amount of work that's been done on that chiller, that equipment over X amount of time, and then where that sits in the average. And so I know as a board member, you're going to be keenly aware of what's being done in my district, because I've got to be responsible to my people. But Nate, you may want to kind of mention what you shared with me, but it gives really good data to help us understand what we've spent on equipment. But again, I think the real important part is about knowing and understanding the replacement costs, and that's what you guys are talking about, and I think that's very important. But you might want to mention.
It's a version of what Tony just mentioned. We have an ongoing list that we use to kind of create not a batting order, but a window into what's towards the top of this list, and then we start to look at and evaluate which units need to be replaced and in what order. There's a lot that goes into, I don't want to delay Tony's presentation, but there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into selecting replacements. And it's not just how old your building is. I know everybody wants to know every school wants to know when is it my turn. But there's a lot that goes into it to replace kind of the most needy machines to restore some reliability at that campus.
So right before, one quick question for clarification. Can you define deferred maintenance?
So something that has reached its useful life, carpet, a roof, something that is supposed to last for 20 years, and we've exceeded that 20 years.
Okay.
And we deferred the maintenance on that item.
I just want to make sure everyone listening understands what that is. Thank you. All right.
And so just another point, too, before we get into the presentation. So life cycle is here to take care of issues that are larger than the maintenance department can handle. From a dollar value standpoint, from a manpower standpoint. So that's basically what we do. We handle the larger projects. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tony Champion. I'm the Director of Facility Assessments and Life Cycle. Next slide, please. Okay, you're up there. All right, back a slide, please. Okay, so what we're going to discuss in the presentation is current future projects update, and then we'll have a period for questions and comments at the end. Of course, if you guys want to break in the middle, that's fine. Next slide, please. So the projects you see on this list are projects that are nearing completion or starting the commissioning phase. They were all started back in fiscal year 24. They're finishing up in fiscal year 25, which we're getting into. On this slide and the next one, you'll see mostly mechanical projects, and a lot of them are chiller replacements. In the past, we have done mainly larger mechanical projects where we replace the HVAC system in the building. And while we're there, we incorporate other needs, such as aged intercom systems that we can no longer service or find parts for, DDC systems that we can no longer find parts for or communicate with from central office, fire alarm systems that have exceeded their useful life and we can no longer repair or service. And we look at any roof issues, sealant issues for windows and louvers, painting exterior metal components, etc. And we try to go in and fix everything that we can in the school while we're there, so that when we walk away from that school to go on to our next project, that school should be a viable educational facility for the next 15 years without having to have major maintenance. And so that's the goal when we do a larger project. With the chiller issues we've had over the last several years, we kind of slowed down on those all-encompassing projects a little bit and tried to increase our chiller replacement projects, and you'll see that over the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So the process for selecting chillers, something that Nate was alluding to just a few minutes ago. We have a deferred maintenance list that we go through, and we can sort all of that to types of assets. And so we'll look at the chillers and what chillers, when they were installed, those that have exceeded their useful life, and we'll rank probably the top 15 or 20 of those chillers. And then we'll compare that against the list that's generated from Maximo that has the cost data for maintenance dollars that have been spent on them. And we'll try to pick the chillers that appear to have the most need. We'll sit down then with either Lou or Lou and Nate, and we'll go through that list and make sure that that list makes sense. At that time, Nate and Lou can also add to that list chillers that they are having failures on currently, and we put those at the top of the list. And then we start our projects for those. Next slide, please. So these projects are projects where the design contracts have already been developed and let, and we put the equipment out for bid through purchasing. And so the way we do that, we talked about the 36-week lead time on chillers currently. So what we do with a life cycle project is when we identify a chiller that needs to be replaced, we select a designer to do the design for it. Before his contract is even executed, he gives us a selection for a chiller. We go ahead and bid that selection while his contract is routing, and we put the selection out for the chiller, we get bids back for the chiller, and then we start the purchase process for the chiller. So while we're doing the design, bidding the project out and getting the contractor under contract, we use all of that time to eat up a lot of that lead time on the chiller, so that once we get the contractor under contract, hopefully it's not long after that before the chiller is going to arrive and we can go ahead and do the project. We're also pre-purchasing, we haven't talked a lot about this, but we're also pre-purchasing boilers, and we're keeping several of those in stock. for emergency replacement. So when we get into heating season and we have boilers fail, instead of having to wait the 6 to 12 weeks now to buy a boiler, we have several of those that are sitting in stock, ready to go out to a school to be installed. We can't really do that with chillers. We've kind of talked about that. We can't really do that with chillers because there are so many different sizes of chillers. And it would be hard to have one of the right size for every school, as large as they are. We just don't have real estate to set them, and it would be extremely expensive.
Is the size of the chiller unique to like the footprint of the school?
It's unique to the footprint of the school, the design of the school, and the number of chillers at the school.
Are all chillers like the same brand, or are they different brands? Does that run into?
There are 3 approved chiller types in our specifications, and any chiller that meets that specification that is submitted prior to the bid date, we have to accept. Typically, we have about 4 manufacturers that submit. There are 3 manufacturers that are typically successful. So no, they're not all the same manufacturer. From a life cycle standpoint, we've been lucky. We've had one manufacturer that has consistently been successful at achieving low price, and they seem to be a fairly reliable piece of equipment.
Hang on. Mr. Swanson, did you have?
I do. Yeah, thank you. So if there's 3 different chillers that are approved, is there a cost difference with those 3? And if so, well, I'll let you answer that first part.
There is always a cost difference, which is those pieces of equipment have to be bid. And so each representative of that equipment line will provide a bid with a price for their piece of equipment that meets that specification. And then as a government entity, we have to take that low price unless for some reason that piece of equipment can be disqualified.
Thank you. It's no need. Thank you.
Boilers are easier to do because most of the condensing boilers that we have in the district are 2 million BTU. We have some that are small, we have some that are larger, but by and large, most of them are 2 million BTU. So it's easy to buy boilers that are the correct size and keep those in stock, which is why we do that. Next slide, please. So some of the other types of life cycle HVAC projects we undertake are shown on this slide here. Much like the projects on the first slide, some of these are considerably larger in scope than just a chiller or boiler replacement. And these are the projects I talked about. Some of these are the projects I talked about earlier, like for instance the Wakefield Elementary School HVAC controls and exterior upgrades. That is a project that encompasses not just HVAC and controls. We'll also be doing fire alarm, intercom, some exterior work on the building, sealants, painting exterior metal, etc. Some of these projects are smaller, but those are the larger projects that I was talking about earlier. All of our projects are need-based. None of them are just, a school that we just picked. All of these things are need-based. They're based on data. We go through and they're all scored based on age, and then feedback from maintenance and operations about what they feel the order needs to be based on what they're seeing as far as maintenance requirements. We consider the age of installation, life cycle of systems, other projects that also may be happening on the site that we can couple with to maximize the use of project manager manpower and other factors. We consider needs provided by energy and physical plant supervisors such as intercom, the fire alarm department, the energy management department, which handles the HVAC controls, the electrical department for electrical systems, and other things to develop these larger projects. So we actually go out and talk to the supervisors of each one of those departments and get feedback from them on what we're adding into these projects to make sure that we're doing something worthwhile. We also consider... Ms. Caulfield had a question.
I was just curious, as you were going through these lists, are we seeing this in order that it's being done? Is there a priority, or are you just kind of listing what's out there? As you're going through all this, I'm just wondering, are we seeing this in like priority order? How is this listed on all of
This
these
is
slides?
listed by project type. And at the top, you'll see that these projects are going to complete in fiscal year 26, 27. And so these are actually the order in which they've already been picked and scheduled to happen.
Okay, so the ones that are further down where it says the year 25, they're already in process, or, okay, just wanted to.
Everything that you'll see here is already in process.
Okay, thank you.
We also consider roof warranty, ceiling condition, and needs for exterior painted assets, which we talked about earlier. Something we're doing more of now that we hadn't done as much of in the past on its own is we're doing HVAC controls. So many of the district's HVAC controls, as Nate talked about, are in need of replacement, some of them immediately. We're analyzing the systems with the most need and prioritizing them for replacement. We now have a controls person on staff, and he's actually going through our systems and selecting the ones that are the most need. He's been on staff for 3 weeks now. We already have 2 projects bid, and we have 5 more that are already scheduled.
Tony, could you, I guess, kind of give us your thoughts on controls, knowing these are computer systems? How often do they have to be replaced? Because I don't know the answer to this. If it was pure technology, I could say that we have to update it every so often because the systems require greater bandwidth. But what is the effect on the controls that actually run our systems? I don't know.
It's like any other technology. Once they stop licensing or supporting the software, there's a period of time after that you can still utilize that software, and then at some point it's going to have to be replaced because there's no support for it at all.
And the reason I asked that question...
You can probably speak better to that. There's some that are already...
Well, I want to add to that too. Some of our oldest systems were, hey, you buy it and it's yours. Some of the newer systems you need to license every year. And just like your phones, the new one comes out sooner and sooner. So sometimes buildings that are only a couple handfuls of years old already have a system that the vendor has decided we're not supporting that anymore. Again, much like the major phone manufacturers, like it'll still work, but we're not supporting it, and at this point we're not going to make anything new for it. So it's hard to say into the future how long they're going to be viable. From a specification standpoint, we use an open protocol system as best we can so that we can get systems that we can support. They're not proprietary. That's really important for us because we don't want to be held hostage by any one vendor. A lot of effort went into selecting that several years ago, but this is just a matter of trying to keep up with technology as it goes forward.
Next slide, please. So we'll go back in time just a little bit for different types of life cycle projects. These will also be completed in this fiscal year. We complete projects other than building systems such as HVAC, electrical controls. On this slide, you can see that we perform athletic facility reconstruction, such as tracks and tennis courts. We're also doing interior projects such as gymnasium floor replacements. We're doing vinyl tile replacements. Go to the next slide. We're doing elevator replacements. And then, of course, we're tackling fire alarms. With the staff that we have now, we're able to get through 8 to 10 fire alarm systems a year. If you look, we've got, how many fire alarm systems? I know we've got 270. 270. So at 8 to 10 a year, 27 years. So all of our needs come from a combination of capital forecasting and discussions with the energy and physical plant. So we use our capital forecasting software, which generates all the needs that we have in the district based on all the assets that have been tagged. And We take those projects and we also talk with the energy and physical plant, maintenance and operations and the other shops to find out what the needs are to help rank these projects before we actually plan to do it.
Just so there's not any confusion, you said it's 10 fire alarm systems a year,
8 to 10 fire alarm systems per year for replacement, yes.
but are we behind in any way on that? Because it kind of gave me, oh, it's going to take 27 years to replace them all, but we probably have a bunch of that are just fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's to replace them all. You
Okay.
know, so I think that's the operative word there. We have some systems, again, some that can no longer be expanded. We can't add devices to it. It works perfectly fine, but if we were to modify the building, we couldn't add or expand onto that system. And I think any of you who've been in a new school understand that the new fire alarm systems act a little bit differently than the old ones. They tell you to get out of the buildings, whereas the other ones are just horns and strobes. So they've changed over time. So, but yeah, we don't have to change them all. They're not all do, but there certainly are some that are.
I did
that are
not
ready.
want the impression to be left that we had any unsafe fire alarm systems.
As we move through time.
So,
How long do they last? Because that's exactly what I was thinking is, sounds like, oh, we'll get to it by 27 years. I'm sure that's not the case.
15 to 20 years.
all right.
Thank you.
One other type of project that we're also doing is we're going through and renovating the sewer lift stations that the district owns. We're able to get to one of those a year. It's not that large a project. It's just lead time on pumps, design and construction time. It takes about 12 months.
We don't have a lot of those either. We have some.
Next slide, please. A new type of project that we're pursuing this year that Mark alluded to is we're starting to take on asphalt parking lots. Many of the district's parking lots are in need of replacement, not just seal coating. The cracking asphalt leads to trip hazards. And as the asphalt cracks and we get water in the cracks and freezing, that freeze-thaw cycle just makes the asphalt worse. We have huge potholes that have to be repaired. And so there's a lot of parking lots in the district that need to be replaced. We're taking on 3 of those this year, maybe a 4th, depending on manpower and budget, how the project cost comes back. You can also see that we're doing elevators, cafeteria floors, we're doing gym floor replacements, and all of those projects are need-based. Obviously, most of the elevator projects are elevators that have stopped functioning already, and we'll go out and refurbish the elevator entirely and bring it up to standard. Next slide, please. These projects will be completed in fiscal year 26. We're looking at elevators, fire alarms, roofs, and then we're also coupling with the Print Strategic Projects Department to do the Fuquay Arena Elementary School renovation. So that has been paid for by a couple of different budgets. Next slide, please. So the life cycle budget for fiscal year 25 is $40 million. You can see there how it rises to $50.6 million expected in fiscal year 30. Our cost estimates for our projects this year, I have $45 million worth of projects planned on a $40 million budget. Just based on experience, what we've seen with savings and design cost, reconciliation of unused contingency on projects, etc. We should be able to get through all of our projects on this list inside the 40 million, but it's going to be tight. But I would rather plan to use all of that and get as much work as we can get done instead of leaving something there on the table that we could have accomplished.
I have a technical question. I don't want to get in the weeds, but I am curious as to what is the difference between, so going back to HVAC, What's the difference between an HVAC plant replacement versus HVAC and exterior? Like, I'm looking at slide 3, so like Olive Chapel, for example, compared to, and Weatherstone compared to Middle Creek.
So
What?
the HVAC plant replacement is a physical plant that has the large centralized equipment, the heat generating equipment like boilers, and the cold water generating equipment like chillers. Their pumps, any heat exchangers, air separation devices, and the controls. And so that's what a plant is. So the equipment that generates the hot or cold water is used to heat or cool the school is located in that central plant, and so that's what a plant replacement is. A full HVAC replacement includes that plant, plus we go through and replace the air handlers, associated controls, valves, electrics, fire alarm, and other systems in the building that are at the point of needing replacement.
So like in this example on slide 3, Olive Chapel, Weatherstone, they're getting like full replacements. Is that the, okay, thank you.
So at the bottom of the slide, you can see the breakdown of the percentage of the budget and what type of projects they go to. As Mark said earlier, our HVAC is about 50% of our budget. Other building systems, fire alarm, intercom, et cetera, is 17%. Site and athletics, that's parking lots, tennis courts, tracks, those kinds of things, are about 18% of our budget. And then building envelope, which is sealants, ethos, and roofs, and those kind of things, are about 15% of our budget. Last slide.
And I'm sorry, I had jumped ahead. I thought we were here, so I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Questions coming around the board table? I know we've been asking as we go. Ms. Rice?
I know it's a
Wait
lot.
till we finish.
Does anyone else? Or am
I have a comment, Mr. Hurst.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So with the CIP, there's that 7-year rolling look ahead. This is a 3-year. And it continuously updates every year as we go down. It's just a shorter window of things that are quickly identified as needing work. So just want to make sure you all know this is a 3-year window that continues to go as time marches on.
And a lot of these projects, actually all of these projects have already commenced. We're either in the RFQ phase for selection of designer. Some of these are in the bid phase, and the earlier ones obviously are already under construction.
So this is more of a comment than a question, and it's really just philosophical. But you know, if you look at the life cycle improvements, and I thank Mr. Champion for laying them out here, you know, you'll see you're looking at 40 to 50 million a year over the course of many years to get us to where we need to be. And we've talked about our budget. Now, not to confuse issues because we've got different pools of money, but this past year we got an additional like about $57, $58 million to pay for what? Master's pay for teachers, shortages in social workers, counselors, psychologists, trying to bring our staff wages up to fight for inflation. If these responsibilities, which constitutionally are supposed to be supported by the state government, then our county government would have had $40 to $50 million they could have potentially put toward these necessary improvements, right? And I just don't want that to be lost on everybody. We are very lucky to live in a county like Wake County that has the wealth to be able to support our schools and get us closer to like every recommendation for what we should be paying for in terms of teacher salary, social workers, and all these important positions. But it comes at a cost, and the cost is that those are resources that aren't available for what local governments are supposed to do, which is take care of the bricks and mortar and all these important systems.
Yep.
And like we said, you know, we want great instruction, and we're obligated to pay for that. But if kids can't be in school because it's either too hot or too cold, they're not going to get that great instruction. So I commend you all for the work that you've done, and I really appreciate you bringing these numbers to us. I would like to encourage you to bring us more information about strategically what it would look like to go forward in more detail with these life cycle improvements, the system improvements, and the specific, repairs and renovations and life cycle. And, we'll take it to the folks that fund us and see what we can do about trying to address this problem. I know you can't do it without the resources, and I appreciate what the creativity you've put into trying to make it work with what you have. But, I mean, it's obvious you have to have more, so.
So one thing I want us to think about, as we start talking about trying to increase budget so we can take care of these things, the work takes people.
Yep.
And if you increase the budget by $50 million next year, we'll have 30 or 35 million still sitting in the pot at the end of the year because we don't have the manpower to do it. 75% of my budget is done by 3 of the 5 project managers I have. And right now, my department is fully staffed and there are no other open positions. We need, in order to get to where we're going, we need another couple, maybe 2 HVAC project managers to go along with the increased budget. And they are very hard to find. So we need to find them first and get them in place. So that way when we do get an increased budget, we can start immediately making good use of that money to improve our schools.
So as a follow-up to that, looking at the shortages we have in the labor pool right now, if funding could be made available to add those project managers, and it was a competitive salary, do you think that we could fill those positions?
If the salary was competitive, we could fill the positions, I think. It's not going to be quick. The last position that I filled has been open for 3 years. So, 4 years actually. So it takes a while to find the person, which is why I stress that if that's the direction we're going, we need to start trying to find people now with positions to put them in. So that way, once we get the budget, we can actually do good work.
Thank you.
And we have started that process, laying the groundwork, depending on the funding.
Thank you, Mr. Sir.
Ms. Edmonds, then Mr. Swanson, that's right.
So just, if any of my colleagues disagree, say so, but we hear you about that staffing piece. So when, again, if y'all disagree, say so, but we hear that is a piece. When we're talking about increasing the budget for facilities, toward this work, we hear that personnel piece and those position pieces has to be a part of that. So thank you, but that's clear to me, and I think it's clear to all of us, but.
I agree. I do think, and thank you, Mr. Hershey, and thank you for this presentation. But I also think it's the culture aspect of it too. Yes. The culture has got to shift in order for vacancies and folks who feel a sense of belonging. We can put as much emphasis in manpower and pay, but the pay does not equate to the respect that folks want in the organization. So I think it's a both and, not an either or approach.
Ditto with that. Mr. Swanson took my notes down here that I had because I keep hearing, even if you give us the money, we still have a staffing challenge. So I want to encourage you all who are doing the hiring process to dig a little deeper of what you're looking for and see how we can move in some different practices. I hate to be, sometimes it's just easy for me to just be direct, but we need to figure out what it looks like you're looking for, you're not finding it in that pool. Maybe we need to look at a different pool of candidates to find what we're looking for. It's just, and I may be limited in thinking, but Wake County is a pretty intelligent county and educated people, right, of all backgrounds. And I think we need to be looking at some different backgrounds than what we're currently looking at and what I'm currently seeing every time I see this department. And so I would love to see what that looks like, and we probably could solve some of these challenges if we have some more diverse background. And in my professional opinion, of having a person who has to do hiring and stuff for other organizations and companies. So I would like for us to look at that. The other thing I would like is can you provide some type of recap for me of what you guys are going to provide us as the board moving forward, and primarily in respect to what can we expect around the heating of these schools and any additional things related to heating the building to avoid school cancellations and early dismissal. So for me, what I need to be satisfied as a board member to support all these great things that we're hearing, what are you all planning on doing next? Like, what are you guys planning on doing first? Because all I'm hearing is staffing is a challenge, money is a challenge, but that's all I hear. And I have to be very direct because I don't necessarily know how to help if all I know is that this is the problem. I really need to hear from this great pool of leaders here. I really need to hear what are your plans to move us despite the challenges, because that's what we as leaders kind of do. We figure out a way despite the challenges. So I'm just curious, what does that look like for you guys with making sure the heating is there in the buildings and to avoid the cancellations and dismissals as much as possible? Because if not, we're repeating the same cycle, and then I have to revert to Dr. Taylor and say, we've got to do something different because we need some type of difference in what we've been getting. Thank you.
Ms. Rice, would you like them to collaborate and get back to you in a small group setting, or when would you? Yes.
No, not me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
So no, not me.
does anyone else have any other questions? All right, I will wrap us up. So I think what we want to do, clearly, we're going to continue conversations around this and renovations in general. And then the facilities committee, and I'll talk with Mark and Dr. Taylor about some small group meetings. I think it'd be, I can't wait to get like District 6 information specifically. I think that's extremely helpful. Because I think that's something that I would probably do as a BAC meeting, is coming and just presenting about the schools in District 6 and when they might be up for some improvements, or kind of the history of when they've received it. So, my constituents understand what's going on. But I think at the end of the day, you have a board that would like us to be more aggressive in finding the funding, with an understanding that while we do that, we've got to increase the staffing levels. Otherwise, finding that funding is going to not be impactful. And whether it's through a bond or a different funding source, the more information you can provide us that we can then provide to the community, the more support we'll get. Because we do get a lot when it comes to HVAC and to renovations. This is, our babies are at these schools, and we hear about it all the time, so, as we should. I think that's going to cover new business for now, because I've got to steal Dr. Taylor with, go ahead.
I just want to ask off of
Sure.
what you just said. When you come to us with a list of more money, obviously you spoke about funding and staff. Are some of these positions already in the budget with vacancies? So we do have the money in the budget. What's the difference of what we need to add? Like, just having that clarity would be
I think
very helpful.
Then that's a small group meeting. I think that's
Right.
a perfect question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything good for the group? All right. Dr. Taylor, you got anything? Or?
Well, I just wanted to
Yeah, sure.
offer a couple of closing
definitely.
comments. And I do want to say to the board that one of the things that I will stay committed to is making sure we talk about solutions to the problems and the time frame that those solutions will take place. And the one thing I don't want us to be is a group of people in the department that give excuses about why we can't do the work. So I think that everybody at this table now knows and understands what the problem is. And so I'm going to take a page out of the chair's book, and I already sent something to Lisa about how I want to be able to talk about this specifically with our public. And I'm not saying we're going to do a video, but something like that. So it's, what I recognize is that it is about how we communicate. And I can tell you that I've had time to really dig into these guys' mind, and they do really understand the nature of the problem. But it is about how we share that with our public. I think that Chair Haggerty brought up an excellent point, and this is what I call the Kobayashi Maru, the no-win scenario, that from a local perspective, the commissioners provide us that funding, but we have had to make the choice of, do we pay people so we have teachers in place, or we deal with these kind of issues? And that is not only in Wake County. When we were doing the facility needs grants, we had $500 million to give out, and we had $2.7 billion in requests. And that's just a small portion of what we're talking about. So everything is about how we're going to communicate, how we're going to refocus where we use funds. We certainly want to look at personnel and recruitment, because you have so eloquently said that if we don't have people in place, then we're going to have funding sitting in a pot that we can't do anything with it. I've tried to be very calculated about this, because I know it is a problem that requires a specific solution. I'm smart enough to know that if there was a solution to this problem, it would have been solved before I got here. And so I don't have that magic bullet, that magic wand, but I do think I understand how we have greater conversation about this, and ultimately at the end, we're able to say, these are the resources that we have, and these are the problems that we're going to be able to fix in this time, until we as a community and we as a state come up with a bigger solution to solve what we know is a problem. So we've heard you. We're going to continue to be as transparent as we can, and let our students and our parents know that this is something that we want to solve in a way that's going to make school better for children.
Thank you, Dr. Mallett. Before I gallow us out, the expectation from the facilities chair is that facilities staff will be in touch with board members to set up school visits before the next facilities meeting.
Do we have an update on our road trip?
That's what that's about. Yeah.
That's one thing.
Yeah. All right. Without anything else, this meeting is adjourned. Yeah, show exactly what that was.
Okay.
All individual. Because the first.